One hot summer day, Jay and his friends were playing outside. The sun shined down on Jay and his friends as they kicked a soccer ball back and forth. Soccer was Jay's favorite sport to play. Almost every day, Jay would invite his friends from his neighborhood to come out and play soccer in the street. Jay dreamed of one day being a professional soccer player. He imagined shooting a goal and hearing the roar of thousands of people as they cheered his name throughout the soccer stadium. Jay knew it would require a lot of practice if he wished to make his dream a reality. One day, as the sun was beaming down on the street where Jay and his friends played earlier, an ice cream truck approached. As soon as Jay heard the ice cream truck's music playing, he ran outside his house with $2 in his hand. Jay looked around to see where the ice cream truck was. As soon as he spotted it down the street, he bolted towards it. Jay's friends had arrived first and were already asking the ice cream man for a cone of their favorite flavor of ice cream. This gave Jay time to think about what flavor to get. Should I get chocolate or vanilla? Jay asked himself. What's it going to be, son? The ice cream man asked Jay when he noticed he was the last kid standing without an ice cream cone. I'll have pistachio, please, Jay responded after some hesitation. This summer had turned out to be the best so far for Jay. Tomorrow he would play soccer once more, and if the ice cream truck came around, he would ask his parents for another $2. Jay was not looking forward to starting his school year in 2 weeks. One day, Abel opened his refrigerator and gasped when he noticed there wasn't anything in there. Who ate all the food? Abel asked his brother Mel, who was in the living room sitting down on the couch watching cartoons. You probably woke up in the middle of the night and ate it all, Mel humorously responded. Abel was not amused. His stomach was growling, and he had no time for Mel's childish quips. I'm so hungry, I could eat a horse, Abel proclaimed. I bet you can easily eat two, Mel jokingly said. You are so funny, Abel sarcastically replied. Abel thought of ordering a pepperoni pizza by phone, but soon realized he had only $5. He needed $10 to make the purchase. He was short by $5. Abel asked his brother if he could pitch in for the rest, but he had no cash. Are you even hungry? Abel asked Mel. I already ate, Mel said. This made Abel jealous and a bit angry. What did you eat? Abel inquired with furrowed brows. A $10 pizza, Mel casually replied. You must be kidding, Abel said, almost yelling. Mel just sat there watching a recording of an episode from The Simpsons. When is Mom coming back? Abel asked Mel. I don't know, he replied. Abel could now only hope that his mom would come to the rescue and bring a large, fresh pizza from Pizza Mountain. Abel plopped down next to Mel on the couch and started watching television with him. They both laughed out loud at the cartoon's funny characters. Abel was enjoying himself so much that he had forgotten that he was hungry. Then commercials began playing. Abel's stomach started calling for food again. I'm going to starve to death, Abel said, as the front door to his house started opening. I'm back, and I brought pizza, Abel's mom said as she came in through the door. Abel could not wait to get his hands on the pizza. Joel's school semester was ending soon, but he still had not found a job to keep him busy over the summer vacation. This wasn't the only reason Joel wanted a job. He had been taking the bus to school for over a year already. He was ready to start driving to school. All of his friends had been driving since the age of 18, and Joel felt like he was left behind. He had calculated the math and figured it would take him 2 months of working for him to be able to afford a used vehicle, or 1 month if he worked full-time. Joel had it all planned out. The only problem was finding steady employment. Joel felt like he had applied everywhere possible. He had walked into several fast food restaurants. He had stepped in countless coffee shops. He had visited various retail stores and supermarkets. Joel went around shaking the hands of managers, introducing himself as a college student who is interested in working. Joel mingled with employees and talked to frequent customers in hopes of getting some recognition or even a piece of advice. After submitting application after application, it seemed like he would never get hired. Joel felt like giving up hope. But then, one afternoon, Joel received a call for an interview. Joel jumped for joy when he discovered the interview was for a job working at a bookstore. Joel was so determined to get the job that he was hired right after his interview. He had greatly impressed the manager, who felt he was the perfect candidate for the job. Everything was going according to his plan. Soon, he had enough money saved up to buy the car he had dreamed of. Riding the bus is as easy as pie. The bus driver is there to answer any questions passengers may have, and it only costs $1.50. These were the things Valerie had heard from all her friends about public transportation. She had never ridden on the bus alone before. This was about to change in 15 minutes as she stood waiting at the bus stop at the corner of Atlantic Avenue and 61st Street. Valerie had just turned 15 and was ready to start riding the bus on her own. Valerie's mom had sent her to Grandma's house for a weekend stay. She had packed all her belongings in a backpack and was dressed in her lucky outfit in case she crossed any black cats. She was heading to the city of Montebello, where her grandmother lived. Her heart began racing when she saw the number 260 bus approaching in the distance. She looked around to see if she was alone, but there wasn't anyone else waiting for the bus. She was all alone. "Come on, you can do this," Valerie said to herself. She remembered she and her mother had taken the same bus to her grandma's house dozens of times. "It's just like before, except Mom is not here," Valerie said, trying to ease herself. The bus finally came to a halt at its stop, and its doors opened in front of Valerie. She took a deep breath, looked at the bus driver, and stepped inside. Valerie put the money into the slot and greeted the bus driver. She then proceeded to the back of the bus and quickly sat down next to an elderly woman. The scariest part was over. Now all I have to do is sit and wait until I reach my destination, said Valerie to herself. "Don't forget to pull the cord," a familiar voice said in her head. Monday was the day of the big test. Luella had 3 days left to study. She knew she had to study for at least 3 hours per day in the next couple of days if she hoped to get the grade she wanted. Luella needed to score at least a 90% on her test in order to pass her algebra class with an A. The stakes were high for Luella. She had attended every lecture this semester. She had jotted down notes upon notes to take home and study. She had even sat in a few tutoring sessions after class. After turning in all her homework and passing all her quizzes, Luella still felt like she could fail her final test. After all, it was cumulative, meaning the test would test her on everything she had learned. Luella knew what she had to do. It was time to buckle down and study like there was no tomorrow. Motivated and determined, Luella sat at her desk and studied for at least 3 hours for the next 3 days. By the time the night before the test came, Luella felt confident that she would do well. Luella woke up that Monday morning with a grin on her face. She had dreamed of taking the test. In the dream, she passed her test with an A. It was up to Luella to make her dream come true that Monday morning. Luella was assured she would. She knew all that studying was about to pay off as she walked into her classroom and sat down at her desk. Nothing can go wrong, Luella said to herself. She was right. Luella not only breezed through all the math problems, but was the first person to finish in her class. Luella knew she could do it. It was of no surprise when she discovered the grade she received. It was an A+. Jenny had always wanted a pet of her own. She wanted something to take care of, someone to be there whenever she came back home, and most of all, an animal to be best friends with. Jenny would constantly ask her dad to buy her a pet, but her dad always refused. Jenny's dad knew having a pet was a big responsibility. He did not think Jenny was ready to own a pet at 10 years old, and that was exactly what he told her when she asked for one. "When will I be ready?" Jenny asked one day. "Wait until you're 12, Jenny's dad replied. This was good news for Jenny. All she had to do now was to be patient. 2 years had passed. Jenny had been counting down the days on her calendar. The morning of her 12th birthday, Jenny jumped on her dad's bed and immediately reminded him of what he had said 2 years ago. "Have you decided on what pet to get?" Jenny's dad asked. Jenny could not respond. She had not made up her mind on what kind of pet she wanted. "Let me think about it," she said, and ran to her room. Jenny took into consideration all the pets she could imagine. She imagined a white, fluffy cat that she'd name Tabby, or a large, bright golden retriever that she'd name Yellow and play frisbee with in the afternoons. She imagined owning colorful macaw that she'd name Polly and have conversations with whenever she felt lonely. After an hour of weighing in the options, Jenny had made up her mind. Jenny's dad was surprised when he found out what pet his daughter had chosen. "I want a horse," she declared, when she walked back into her dad's bedroom. "How about something a little less expensive?" he said to Jenny. "A pony?" she cleverly replied. "Let's go to the pet shop," Jenny's dad said. It was 4 o'clock when Jenny and her dad arrived at the pet shop on Slauson Avenue. The name of the pet shop was Pet Wonders. Jenny couldn't contain her excitement and yipped as she and her dad exited the car. Jenny's dad smiled at the sight of her thrilled daughter. He remembered his own first pet. It was a Chihuahua named Taco. He wondered if Pet Wonders was selling any Chihuahuas. Jenny and her dad were greeted by a short and balding man who smelled like dog food. "Hello, how can I help you guys today?" the man said. "We're here to buy a pony," Jenny exclaimed to the man. "Actually, we're here to browse," Jenny's dad said right after. "Let me know when you're ready to make a purchase," the man replied. Jenny and her dad proceeded to look through the aisles. "What do you think of these?" Jenny asked her dad. "They're too small," she said. Jenny saw a variety of colorful fishes. "What about these, Jenny?" her dad asked. "They're too slimy," said Jenny. Jenny came across snakes and turtles. "Would you like one of these?" asked her dad. "I don't think so," Jenny responded. 1 hour passed, and Jenny still had not made up her mind on which animal to choose. Jenny and her dad finally got around to see the cats and dogs. "It's either one or the other," Jenny's dad said, pointing to the cats and dogs. Jenny had to think long and hard on which pet to get. After what seemed like an eternity, Jenny looked up at her dad and said, "I can't choose one." Her dad paused for a minute, smiled, and said to her, "Then choose 2. Jenny went home with a white cat and a black dog, which were the best birthday presents she had ever received. Surfing was Jeffrey's favorite pastime. Every weekend, Jeffrey and his best friend Chad would head to Santa Monica Beach, where they would surf big waves. California was the perfect place to live if you were a surfer. The sunny sky and nice temperature made it an ideal place for surfing. Best of all, California mostly maintains this kind of nice weather throughout the year. Jeffrey and Chad were grateful to be surfers in California and not in Iceland. While their other friends were skateboarding and rollerblading, Jeffrey and Chad were at the beach surfing the day away. Jeffrey was 15 years old when he first learned how to surf. Chad was 2 years younger when he started learning. They both had met at a surfing competition. Jeffrey was 18 and Chad 16 at the time of the competition. Despite being rivals at first, Jeffrey and Chad soon became buddies after the competition. Now 21 and 19, Jeffrey and Chad had become the best surfers on the West Coast. Their medals and trophies were proof of this. There wasn't anything more satisfying in the world than surfing the waters as the sun beamed from above and the wind blew by. Surfing was an exhilarating and incredible experience. It was also a great stress reliever. Jeffrey and Chad felt as if they were on top of the world when surfing. Nothing else mattered when you were in the midst of a barrel ride. Jeffrey and Chad knew that surfing for them would be a lifelong passion. The beach was a great place to be at. This was especially true in the summer when pretty girls would gather on the weekends, bonfires would line the shores at night, and vendors and artists would attract visitors to purchase their wares. There was never a dull moment while at the beach. But if it wasn't for the waters, Jeffrey and Chad would have no reason to go to the beach. There once was a little living doll. She lived inside a doll house that was placed in the corner of a little girl's room. The doll's name was Jane, and the little girl's was Diana. Diana and Jane were best friends. No one else knows that Jane can talk and breathe like anyone else. It was a secret between Jane and Diana. Jane and Diana would play together every day. Sometimes they would play within the dollhouse. They liked watching movies, playing hide and seek, and painting. They also liked playing outside with toy cars and drawing with chalk on the ground. Since Diana was far too big and Jane far too small, they could not play hide and seek and run over long distances. Instead, they enjoyed playing their own version of hide and seek. When they played, it would have to be inside a small room. Jane was always the one to hide, since it was easy for her to do so. One day, it was Diana's birthday, and she had several of classmates from school come over to celebrate. Jane stayed hidden from plain sight in Diana's room. At one point, things became rowdy among some of the boys and girls, and they began to chase each other around the house. Then a few of them entered Diana's room and began invading her things. One of the boys got a hold of Jane, who was in her dollhouse, and started to toss and play catch with her among the boys. Then Diana came into the room and took notice of what was happening to Jane, and immediately yelled for them to stop. They put Jane back down. Jane was so frightened but relieved to be saved. "Get out!" Diana screamed. After everybody left, Diana lifted up Jane and asked her if she was okay. Diana was happy to see that Jane was in one piece. It would be the last time that Diana would bring anyone over to play. This secret was too great to risk its discovery. Nobody could ever know of Jane the living doll. Amisa was a single mother who worked from home tutoring students. She liked this job because it allowed her to stay home with her own little daughter, Nemisha. Amisa saw all her clients at her kitchen table. She picked the kitchen table because from there she could watch her daughter, who usually stayed in the living room. Nemisha usually stayed in the living room when her mother was working with another student. One afternoon, though, Nemisha felt so thirsty. She had to get into the kitchen to get a drink. "Mom, can I please have a drink?" Nemisha asked. Amisa was annoyed. She was in the middle of a lesson. "Yes, but you have to serve yourself because I'm working," Amisa said. Nemisha pulled a step stool up to the kitchen cabinet and stood on it. She opened the kitchen cabinet and reached up to the top shelf to get a blue plastic cup. Then she slipped. Nemisha let out a huge scream. When Amisa got up to see what was wrong, she saw that her daughter's hand had slipped and the tongs of a large serving fork had gone through Nemisha's finger. Nemisha was crying. Amisa was scared. She had her client go home early and was going to rush her daughter to the hospital. She didn't want to try and pull the fork out herself because she was worried that she might make the situation worse. Nemisha lived 4 blocks from the hospital. She felt it was faster to walk to the hospital than call and wait for an ambulance. There was only one problem. It was very cold outside, and Amisa couldn't put a coat on her daughter when she had a huge serving fork protruding from one of her fingers. Amisa wrapped a blanket around her child, and together they quickly walked to the hospital. "My daughter has a fork stuck in her finger," Amisa yelled as she entered the emergency room. Mike was having a beer in the living room one evening while watching a football game. His 5-year-old son, Rob, was playing with Legos on the floor. "Hey, Dad, but I can make one of these Legos disappear," Rob told his dad. Mike was only half paying attention to his son since his favorite team was playing. "Uh-huh," Mike absent-mindedly answered. "Ta-da! I made it disappear," Rob said proudly. Mike asked his son what his secret was. "A magician never tells," Rob said while tapping his nose. Mike shrugged his shoulders. "Guess, Daddy, guess," Rob encouraged. Mike first guessed the Lego was in his son's pocket. He was wrong. Then Mike guessed that the Lego was in his son's sock. That too was a wrong guess. Mike gave up. "It's in my nose, Dad," Rob proudly declared. Mike spit out his beer and rushed to look up his son's nose. He couldn't see anything up there. He went to the kitchen junk drawer and took out a small flashlight. Mike looked up his son's nose again. He still couldn't see the bright yellow Lego piece. "Are you sure it's up there?" Mike asked his son. Rob nodded. "Does it hurt?" Mike asked. Rob shook his head. Mike didn't want to stick anything up his son's nose to try and take out the mini toy brick. He was scared. He would push the Lego up higher and hurt his son. "I guess we have to go to the hospital," Mike told his son. Rob looked scared. It was a short drive to the hospital emergency room. Mike felt like the most negligent dad in the world when he told the triage nurse the reason for the visit. "My son has a Lego stuck up his left nostril," Mike said in a low voice. Hannah was worried about the plants in her garden. Her state recently declared a drought, and her plants were showing that they missed the rain. Her plants were all dead or dying. Their leaves were brown and dry. Even the small patch of grass in front of her house was drying up because of the lack of rain and the overall shortage of water. Hannah didn't want to give up on her garden. She loved spending time in her yard. She loved working with her hands in the dirt. She loved watering the plants and watching week by week her hard work pay off. From a small seed in the soil, she grew flowers and herbs. This season, though, was a bust. She began to do some research on the internet
on drought-resistant plants, which are plants that would do all right in full sun and without regular water. It turned out there were quite a few plants that were drought-resistant. Through her internet search, Hannah even found a website for a place that was selling native plants, which were grown naturally from her climate. Hannah laughed at the name, though. It was called a nursery. Hannah always thought a nursery was a bedroom for a newborn baby or a very young child, not a place to buy plants. The more she thought about it, though, the more it made sense. Going to a nursery was like going to get a baby, except in this case, the baby was a plant she would bring home. Hannah drove 30 minutes to get to the nursery, which had a whole section of drought-resistant plants. She walked up and down the outdoor aisles, carefully considering her options. Then she stopped in front of a small seedling that was just flowering. I found my baby, she thought.
Catherine loved Facebook. With Facebook, she could keep in contact with her family, no matter how far away they were. She could see photographs of her cousins and read status updates from her aunts and uncles. With Facebook, she could keep her relatives up to date on what she was doing. With a few taps on the keyboard and hitting the send button, she could tell a dozen or more people about her new job. She could also send pictures so that they wouldn't worry that she wasn't eating enough or was unhealthy. Another thing Catherine loved about Facebook was that she didn't have to think about time zones when updating family. Whenever she called her parents or other relatives, she always had to think about the time difference so that she wouldn't wake someone up or call when she knew they were at church. Facebook was so convenient. Another thing happened when Catherine joined Facebook, though. Some people she went to high school with started to add her as a friend. At first, this didn't bother her. She loved learning about the success of people she knew when she was just a teenager. She loved finding out people were getting married, having babies, and traveling. Soon, however, Catherine found herself comparing herself to the people she was reading about on Facebook. It began to make her feel bad that some people seemed to be doing so much better than she was. They had better jobs, nicer clothes, and cuter boyfriends. She was also spending a lot of time on Facebook. It took a lot of time and energy to keep up with everyone's status updates. Catherine started to think. She looked at the list of over 500 friends she had on Facebook and realized some of them were not really friends at all. Jose Luis was taking the train to work one day when he noticed a woman with a big German shepherd getting on the train. This made him nervous. What if that dog attacked someone? Jose Luis didn't know that people could bring pets with them onto trains. It seemed unsafe. He stepped closer to the dog. The German shepherd seemed friendly enough. Just as he put out his hand to pet the dog, the woman stopped him. "Please don't pet him. He's working," the lady told him. Jose Luis didn't understand. The woman explained that she was blind and that the dog Hampton acted as her eyes, helping her navigate her way around the city. The woman pointed out the special vest that Hampton was wearing. The vest was printed with the words, "Service Animal." Jose Luis had never heard of service animals before. Service animals like Hampton are allowed into public places that most pets are not. Hampton is more than a pet. He helps me to be self-sufficient and do the things that I need to do in the city, the woman explained. The woman also told Jose Luis that service animals had to go through special training so that they learn how to behave in public places and do not get distracted. People need to help, though, by not petting him, the woman added. The woman continued to explain that service animals do not just help the blind. Some animals act as therapy animals. Therapy animals go into hospitals and nursing homes. These animals lower the stress levels of people who are very sick or who have just had operations. They also encourage people to recover. Therapy animals are especially popular in children's hospitals. Dogs really can be man's best friends. Michelle was tired after a long day at work. She just wanted to get home, order a pizza for dinner, and go to bed. As she sat on the train home, she closed her eyes. Suddenly, she heard music. It was a harmonica playing a sad song. It sounded like a blues song. She opened her eyes to look where the sound was coming from. Was it from someone's iPod with the volume up loud? The sound was coming from a man leaning against the subway doors, playing a harmonica. When he finished playing the song, he walked up and down the aisles with a cup in his hand, asking for tips. Michelle didn't feel like this was fair. While the music wasn't unpleasant, it's not like she had a choice. She was forced to listen to it since she has to take the train home from work. Now he was asking to be paid by the people being forced to listen. He had some nerve. Michelle didn't give the man any money. Some of her fellow commuters did drop a few coins in the man's cup. "You shouldn't encourage that," Michelle told one of her fellow commuters after he dropped some change in the man's cup. "I don't even think it's legal for him to play music in the train and ask for money," Michelle said. She then scanned the advertisements and notices inside the train car. Sure enough, she found a sign that said playing music and soliciting was not allowed, and that there would be a fine for people caught by the police. When the harmonica player passed by Michelle and extended his cup out so he could put in some change, she pointed to the sign. The harmonica player shrugged his shoulders. "We all have to make a living, lady," he said. School was over for the year. This meant that the school's after-school program, which kept Adriana's daughter, June, in school until she was done with work, was also over. The after-school program was convenient because June didn't have to leave the school. Adriana didn't have to worry about her daughter being home alone. The after-school program also made sure that June did her homework. This made Adriana's job as a single mother so much easier. All she had to worry about when she picked her daughter up from school was dinner. One of the best things about the after-school program was the cost. It only cost $30 a month. The school did not offer a summer program. Adriana did not have a summer vacation from work, so she needed to find a program that would watch June while she was working. Hiring a private babysitter was too expensive. Another mom from June's school gave Adriana information about a local recreational center that was offering a summer program for school-age kids. The program was not as expensive as other summer camp programs, but was more expensive than after-school cost, though. The summer program cost $50 a week. Adriana didn't know how she could afford the program. June didn't understand the sacrifices her mother had to make for her. She was just excited to attend the summer program. She had never been in summer camp before. June was especially excited because her friends would be there with her. Sometimes summer was boring, especially since her mom worked all day. June heard there would be games and crafts. She was going to make something nice for her mom to thank her. Emma felt really bad when someone from her daughter Jessica's school informed her that Jessica needed special education services. Emma felt like she had failed as a mother. It was true that Jessica was always delayed when it came to learning to talk and walk. Emma just thought that her child was different. Every child develops at its own rate. Jessica was 5 years old now, but still was not speaking in complete sentences. Jessica would not be attending a regular kindergarten in a regular school. Instead, she would be attending kindergarten in a special education school. While this bothered Emma at first, she soon learned to appreciate the school. Jessica had a specialized learning plan called an Individualized Education Plan, or IEP. This plan set up specific goals for Jessica, like learning how to feed herself. Jessica also received a lot of individual attention. Instead of her being in a classroom with 20 students, there were only 8 students in her class. All of these students also were delayed, like Jessica. In addition, the class had 2 teachers' assistants to help the classroom teacher. The special education school also scheduled speech therapy sessions for Jessica. Once a day, a specialist would come in and work with Jessica to help her practice learning how to move her mouth and tongue and ask for what she needed and wanted. An occupational therapist helped Jessica learn to feed herself and other age-appropriate self-sufficiency skills. A physical therapist also came in to help Jessica. Emma may have been embarrassed at first that her daughter was in a special education school, but after a year, Emma realized it was the best thing for her. While Jessica still was a little behind other kids of her age, at the end of kindergarten, she was able to attend a non-special education school. Chris knew many of the fathers made fun of him. He was pretty sure some of the mothers did too. He was the president of the Parent-Teacher Association at his daughter's school. He organized all the bake sales, book sales, and met with the school principal regularly to share concerns he heard from other parents. This is not why parents made fun of him. Other parents made fun of him because this was all he did. Chris was a stay-at-home dad. His wife, Maureen, had a demanding full-time job working for an investment bank. She made an excellent salary, but the job meant going in early and coming home late. Chris was never good at holding a regular job. He got bored easily. He'd rather focus on his daughter and what was going on at her school. He became the main caregiver. Chris handled all of the household duties. He took his daughter to and from school. He did all the grocery shopping and cooked all the meals. He cleaned the house and helped his daughter with her homework. Everyone in the neighborhood called Chris Mr. Mom. There were other names Chris heard people calling him, like house husband and house spouse. Chris didn't mind his role at all. He felt secure as a man. He didn't believe that a woman's place was in the home. He was glad that his wife loved her job and worked hard. He worked hard too. He just didn't get a salary like Maureen did. He was happy being paid the love and appreciation from his family. Sometimes Chris felt lonely though. When he took his daughter to the park, there were no other dads around. He felt strange talking to the mothers. He didn't want them to think he was hitting on them or trying to pick them up. December is truly a special time. People start putting up their Christmas decorations and lights outside their homes. Christmas is wonderful because family members from far away come to visit. We eat, drink, and talk about how our lives are going. One of my favorite things to do when my family comes over to visit is go for a ride in my dad's car and see all the houses with their Christmas lights on. Last year, my dad told us that he had seen a neighborhood with the whole block filled with houses with lights. We decided to go see them. The whole family crammed into 2 cars. We drove for about 40 minutes. When we got there, our faces lit up with joy at the sight of all the lights. My cousins decided that they wanted to walk outside and watch the lights. We all got out and started walking, but when it was time to go back home, we didn't notice that my youngest brother was not in the car. He had separated from the family and went to see a house all the way at the end. No one noticed, and we left him there for an hour. He knocked on the house that he went to see and told the people that lived there what had happened. He knew my cell phone number, and so he called me. We were about to arrive at my house when I got the call. I told my dad, and he nearly crashed the car because he got so scared. We dropped everyone off, and I decided to go with my dad to pick up my brother. When we arrived at the house, my brother was sitting on the couch watching television with the children that lived there and drinking hot chocolate. My dad hugged him and said sorry. The people who lived there said that it was fine, that their children liked my brother because he was funny. They said he could come back any time. I was relieved nothing had happened to my brother. Janice was one of those people that loved getting up early for the Black Friday sales stores have after Thanksgiving Day. She loved going to her favorite stores to see what she could get on sale. A friend told her that her favorite store was going to have an amazing sale. They were going to sell a 60-inch television for $300. Janice wanted to make sure she was there early. She went to the store during the night and set up a tent to sleep overnight. Janice noticed that no one else had shown up when she was getting her tent ready, but she didn't care. She loved being there. She was so excited about the sales that she couldn't get any sleep. At around 3:30 a.m., she finally fell asleep. She set the alarm on her phone to wake her up at 6 a.m., But because she left her music playing when she fell asleep, her phone ran out of battery. At around 8 a.m., a man who worked at the store came out and woke Janice up. She was surprised and asked him what time it was. He said it was 8 a.m., and she couldn't believe it. She went into the store and left her tent behind. She wanted to see if they still had the televisions. Janice saw that they didn't. People started looking at her because her hair was a mess. She felt embarrassed and went back to get her stuff. While she was going back home, she noticed another store that was open. She decided to go in and was surprised to see that they had the television she wanted. It was $500 instead of $300. She bought the television and asked one of the workers if they could take it out to her truck. She went home and asked her brother to help her move the television. Once she got the television into her home, she climbed into bed and fell asleep.